We need to talk about what's happening with Roger Waters. Now, I'm going to show you this clip here. I talked about this interview when it happened, but something has happened after this interview, and we're going to get into that as well. But I do just want to take a step back and just remind you why people are coming after Roger Waters now. So just to jog your memory, Roger Waters had an interview with CNN, and the topic of Russia and Ukraine came up along with other issues of Joe Biden's presidency. Roger basically said things that we say here on independent media, and we would probably not be invited on CNN to say. Just keeping it real. But shout out to Roger Waters for this. I'm going to play this, and then we're going to get into the story about what they're doing to Roger Waters now. So here we go.
Yeah. Well, he's fueling the fire in the Ukraine for a start. That is a huge crime. Why won't the United States of America encourage Zelensky, the president, to negotiate, obviating the need for this horrendous war that's killing.
You're blaming.
We don't know how many Ukrainians.
But you're blaming the party that got invaded. Come on, you've got it reversed.
That's you know, any war. When did it start? What you need to do is look at the history, and you can say, well, it started on this day. You could say it started in 2008. Okay, this war is basically about the action and reaction of NATO pushing right up to the Russian border, which they promised they wouldn't do when Gorbachev negotiated the withdrawal of the USSR from the whole of Eastern Europe.
When you say this, then I have to say, what about our role as liberators? You of all people.
You have no role as liberators.
World War II? World War II?
You got into World War II because
Come on.
Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor. You were completely isolationist until that sad, that devastating,
I would argue we were always
going
to get in, and that pushed us in. But thank God the United States got in, right? You lost your father in World War II. Thank God the United States.
Thank God the Russians.
See how the commentator is trying to make it personal for Roger here and remind him that, well, you lost your father in World War II. That's a little trick that they I mean, I think good journalists, really good ones, wouldn't do that. You're kind of supposed to not go down that road, just to be honest with you. But that's kind of like a little sneaky, him bringing up a personal issue to try to get him to change his mind. And I don't like that. I don't like when journalists do that, but it didn't work on Roger Waters. So
had already won the bloody war almost by then. Don't forget, 23 million Russians died protecting you and me from the Nazi menace.
Hey, and you would think the Russians would have learned their lesson from war and wouldn't have invaded Ukraine.
Well, you with all your reading, I would suggest to you, Michael, that you go away and read a bit more and then try and figure out what the United States would do if the Chinese were putting nuclear-armed missiles into Mexico and Canada.
The Chinese are too busy encircling Taiwan as we speak. Okay?
They're not encircling Taiwan. Taiwan is part of China. And that's been absolutely accepted by the whole of the international community since 1948. And if you don't know that, you're not reading enough. Go and read about it.
Okay. Did we solve anything here today?
Yeah, we did. Well, I mean, no, we didn't.
I mean,
you're believing your propaganda, your side's propaganda.
You're defining it as
Taiwan,
propaganda.
you can't have a conversation about human rights, and you can't have a conversation about Taiwan without actually doing the reading.
Roger, if you're having a conversation about human rights, at the top of the list of offenders are the Chinese. Why is it always the Western world?
At the top of your list.
Why is it always the
Chinese
Western
didn't invade Iraq and kill 1 million people in 2003. In fact, as far as I can recall, hang on a minute, who have the Chinese invaded and murdered, slaughtered?
Their own.
Bollocks.
Okay.
That's absolute nonsense. Complete nonsense.
I like that when people say bollocks. I like that word. Notice how Smirkonish frames it, like the framing that he has when he talks about the other groups. It's the Russians. It's the Chinese. I don't like the framing. I don't like when people say it that way. It's like, listen, a lot of this fear mongering about people who are from Russia, people who are from China, I really don't like it. And the United States has done this for a long time. Now, it may not always be the same country, although they've been saying this about Russia for a long time. But it's always something, it's a lot of fear that they try to like instill in people. And the way Smirkonish said it to me is typical narrative that you hear from mainstream media. And Roger Waters called him on his bullshit. A lot of people saw this interview.
You should go away and read, but read some proper.
Hey, my problem is I spend too much time reading your liner notes, okay? Thank you for doing this.
Thank
I appreciate
you for
it.
talking to me.
All
it's
right.
always a pleasure.
Okay, so that happened. How many people saw this interview? Okay, over 879,000 people saw that on YouTube. I don't know how many people actually saw it on CNN, but that's still a lot of people, obviously, right? So some people didn't like this. And now they have continued to move forward and add Roger Waters to a list. I kid you not. Let's get into it. Let's go on. Roger Waters added to Ukrainian hit list. Pink Floyd star declared enemy of Ukraine. Isn't this something, you guys? Like, I can't even make this up. This is what happens. Okay, so we're going to actually start right about here, because that's talking about war part. I have to be careful what I say on here. I just want to get to the Roger part. Okay. So apparently there is this website where they have people who they consider to be not, I guess, making the correct narrative or the narrative that they want to hear in reference to this conflict with Russia and Ukraine. And I cannot read this. I'm sorry. I don't know that language. But this is actually Roger Waters' profile on this site. So you can see here, there's a picture of him. And it goes on to say the co-founder of Pink Floyd is known for his support of imprisoned creator Julian Assange and for his opposition to imperialism and war, as well as for his awesome music loved by millions around the world. Waters recently referred to Joe Biden as a war criminal on CNN and said that Biden is fueling the fire in Ukraine. This war, the musician said, is basically about the action and reaction of NATO pushing right up to the Russian border, which they promised they wouldn't do. Gorbachev negotiated the withdrawal of the USSR from the whole of Eastern Europe. Waters has also said that Crimea belongs to Russia because the majority of the people living on the peninsula are Russian. The rock star's views have outraged the pro-NATO crowd and their Nazi friends, as well as the social justice warriors who froth at the mouth in support of whatever the mainstream media declares to be the current thing. Let me highlight this for just a second, because I want to elaborate a little bit more on this. As well as the social justice warriors who froth at the mouth in support of whatever the mainstream media declares to be the current thing. This happens a lot. If you ever notice, you watch people and you notice, hey, their talking points are starting to change. Hey, last year they said this. A couple of months ago, they said they were against this. Now they're all for it. Those are those types of people. They do that on purpose. It works well for the algorithm. If you're an independent media, it works well for the algorithm. And it's usually things that are trending. Beware of people like that. Beware of the people who always seem to be in support of something that is actually the new thing that mainstream media tells you should be in support of. You should be cautious of people like that. Now we're going to go on here to say Waters, who has always been something of a dissident and anti-war, the way all rock stars used to be when rock and roll was still real, is attacked mercilessly by the woke crowd who are intolerant of all who are not in lockstep with their views. So you'll see here, let me go down. Here's an example. Old rocker off his rocker. Fans slam Roger Waters and tell him to stick to what you're good at as they threaten to sell their tickets to his This Is Not a Drill tour after he branded Biden a war criminal over Ukraine. Guys, I've seen this happen before in my life. It wasn't with Roger Waters. It was with a group called the Dixie Chicks. Some of you in the chat may be old enough to remember this. The Dixie Chicks, they were a country music group, band, whatever you want to call it these days. They were extremely popular at the time. The war in Iraq started. The Dixie Chicks spoke out against the war in Iraq. They also spoke out against President Bush. And in the world of country music, that was a no-no. They were also from his state, Texas. They spoke out at a time when it was not considered cool to do so. Till this day, I still say, if there is one group in particular, a person in particular that I remember actually being canceled, it's the Dixie Chicks. Because after them voicing their views, they were canceled. And when I say canceled, I mean they couldn't book any venues for shows. They couldn't sell tickets at the ones that they were able to get. Their music career was pretty much done. Like, people were burning their CDs. That's right, Rain. They were blacklisted. That's right. Like, so when people say that like Dave Chappelle is canceled, no. I've seen canceled. So the Dixie Chicks, honestly, they weren't able to get like gigs or like these venues. They weren't able to further their career musically for about 10 years. So those mofos were canceled. Roger Waters is not cancels just yet, but this quote here where they're saying stick to what you are good at, that was the same kind of quotes that they were saying to the Dixie Chicks when they spoke out against the war in Iraq. They were told to shut up and sing. They were told to stick to what you're good at. And you know what's really bad? One of their own comrades in country music, Mr. Toby Keith, he was one of the ones who criticized them. You would think the musicians would want to stick together, but no. So hopefully it does not go that way for Roger. But I had to bring up that example because that's exactly, I heard that and I was like, oh, that reminds me of the Dixie Chicks. Yeah. Let's go back in. Okay. So that's one quote. Here's another from a Washington Post article. Pink Floyd's Roger Waters is accused of anti-Semitism ahead of DC concerts. That was actually from 2017, but they're pulling up different examples. So it goes on to say here, this is about the website. An investigation by the Russian Foundation to Battle Injustice reveals the names of the individuals, corporations, and government entities which are believed to be the organizers, sponsors, and curators of the Ukrainian national website. It says that, and I do not know how to pronounce this, I apologize, guys, but Mirovorets, while it's easily accessible to anyone who likes that sort of thing, this Russian human rights organization is blocked on major social media platforms like Facebook. And here's another example of it here. Investigators say that the hit list, which was created in 2014, is supervised by the public organization Meritvets Center, which is headed by Roman Zaitsev, a former employee of Ukrainian Special Services, and by the public organization People's Rear, headed by George Tuka, a Ukrainian statesman and public figure. The site is also controlled by the Security Service of Ukraine and was created on the initiative of Anton Gerashenko, the advisor of Ukrainian's Minister of Internal Affairs. Gerashenko faces charges of terrorism in the Russian Federation for his creation of the hit list. Now, and that's him right there. When, I tell you guys that they were coming after certain types of people, like, I was not kidding. And now they have, this website, apparently, and they've added Roger Waters to this list. I'm not sure if anyone else has spoken about this. I'm not sure if Roger Waters knows about this. I'll just be honest with you. But they're now going after people like him. So at first it was the journalists, the independent journalists, investigative journalists that have been speaking the way that they have been speaking. I have to be careful the way I say it on here as well. And now musician. Now this came out after that interview I just showed you. One more piece that I want to show you here as well. This is an example. Go down here. The U.S. State Department confirmed that the Ukrainian Ministry of Internal Affairs was connected to the website and acknowledged the publication of the journalist's personal data, but the U.S. government has taken no action to block the website. So it's not blocked, FYI, guys. Although many Russian websites and alternative news media may have been blocked by social media giants for publishing information about the war in Ukraine, which does not line up with official narratives. You see this part right here? Remember what happened to Jackson Hinkle? See that? Although many Russian websites and alternative news media have been blocked by social media giants for publishing information about the war in Ukraine that does not line up with the official narrative. That's what people have been experiencing, especially people in independent media, more so. But it goes on to say an analysis of the site's network protocol by the Foundation to Battle Injustice found that the databases used for the technological services of a company in California. And if you look at the main page, you will see the address Langley County, Virginia. There are posts on the site from accounts which have names of Western intelligence agencies. And here's all the alphabet groups here. So that is, I don't want to say I'm surprised because I'm not surprised, but I will say, I'm glad this information is getting out to more people now, because we've talked about this before on RBN that these alphabet letter groups, they are very much infiltrated in all of this, whether it's social media, whether it's platforms like YouTube, Google, they're all, and we're going to get into that when we get into the next story, because you're going to hear that too as well. They're very much infiltrated into it. You really have to be careful. Like, you really just don't know. But long story short, unfortunately, Roger Waters has now been added to this list. Crazy, isn't it? Does this make you want to listen to Pink Floyd? I don't know. Sometimes I think people hear this and they're like, oh, I think I'm going to listen to Pink Floyd. Crazy, huh? I told you they were coming after everybody, not just journalists. They were going to start coming after anybody who spoke out against the mainstream narrative. I want to go to some of the comments. Hypnicity. New subscriber. I love Roger. Thank you and welcome. Thank you for the super chat, CEB Applejack 59. They tried to call Joe Rogan CNN for millennials. Did they say that? That's funny. Oh, man. Thank you for the super chat as well, AJF. Well, thing is, we in the U.S. have Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Congo, Pakistan, Venezuela, Afghanistan, Colombia, et cetera, of varying interference, but yet the West reacts only when Russia invades. Peculiar. I wonder why. Thank you for this super chat as well, CEB. FYI, Biden is a war crim. Here you go. Thank you for the super chat, Roger Meadows. Roger Waters' net worth is $310 million. He'll be all right. Thank you for the super chat, Nima. Eminem spoke out against the Iraq war as well. Didn't seem to damage him. I believe when he did that, because I know that album, The Eminem Show, as well. There's a lot of, actually, most of the songs, I think in most of the songs on that album, it's mentioned in some way, shape, or form in reference to the war. If I remember correctly, I think Eminem did that after. By that time, like, other rappers were doing that too. It wasn't just him. But I think, you know, part of it could be the fact that he was a rapper, so it's different. They were in country music. Country music tends to be more conservative. I don't know if that had an impact as well, you know? Thank you for the super chat, Macharius39. Claire Daly, MEP for the EU, is on that hit list. That wouldn't surprise me either.